My name is Jason Pim. I'm an author and illustrator. I'm from the UK originally, but now I've been living in China for over 20 years. And you are very welcome to my Museum of Chinese Characters. So I grew up in the English countryside in the middle of nowhere, and there was no Chinese people, but my dad had a hobby, which was to study classical Chinese. And so when I was growing up, me and my sister were surrounded by these posters with all the Chinese characters and Chinese art. And then he even, like on the weekends, he even made us play mahjong with my mom and so on. So we grew up with all this stuff. So I always had this impression of Chinese as this really like interesting language, and then Chinese culture as being this, you know, exciting, huge, exotic thing. And so I was always fascinated. And then I did some traveling around Southeast Asia. And then in Southeast Asia, always the bit that I really loved the most was the Chinatowns. And so I decided then that when I went back home, I would study Chinese at university, and then I got my degree in Chinese, and then I came. Me and my wife Cici, we went on our honeymoon, and as part of our honeymoon leaving Shanghai, we went through Dali. And when we were there, we were sitting in this cafe, and we're looking at the beautiful landscape and the blue skies, and we thought, this is the place that we want to live, this is the place we want to have a family and spend our next few years. But once we actually settled down and we started to explore, you find that the Baizu and everything around is really different to anywhere else I've been in China. So I thought I'd really like to record all this and get it down. And also I love to draw. Every weekend we would go out, we'd go and explore old towns, we'd go up in the mountains, and so we'd write it all down. And then eventually it became this book. The thing that makes me happiest, really, is when people from Dali like pick up the book and say, oh, this was fun, or I didn't know about this, or, you know, like that reminds me, oh, I used to go to this place when I was a kid. Things like that. That's the thing that really makes me happy. As an English native speaker, with all these like 26 boring letters, you see these Chinese characters, you're like, wow, that's amazing, like thousands of all these pictures, that's so cool. And so you want to know more about it, so then you go and look at the stories behind it. But if you got 为什么的为, like 为字, the earliest time it meant like 为人的为, like 做. If you look at the 繁体字, you can see it's more like an elephant and a hand, and then the 甲骨文 is really clear. And so it was a person like forcing an elephant to do work. So this became do, because it's doing work. But then why would you use an elephant and not a water buffalo or a horse or a donkey or some other animal? It's because thousands of years ago, all along the Yellow River, you had elephants everywhere, and they used them as beasts of burden, they used them to plow the fields. So from this character that you use every single day, all day, you can see how the sort of natural history from China, which I think is amazing, you know, and it's all buried inside these characters. If you just have a look, like back, how they were formed. 这是耳朵，眼睛。We go home back to the UK quite often, but then about sort of 10, 15 years ago, it happened that we go back. And the first week I was so excited to be back and, you know, see all the things that I missed. But after about 1 week, I was kind of like, okay, I've had enough now. And then I really started to miss the food, especially. And then the weather, like living in Kunming or living in Yunnan, you're really spoiled because you have this perfect weather every day. And British weather is not fun. I do not miss that at all. So once it got to the point that when I'm here, I can be here for, you know, years and not even really think about the UK very much. Whereas when I'm there, I really start to miss being here. So that's from that point when I started to think that, oh, this is my actual home. This is where I feel comfortable. This is where I can relax. That's when I felt more that it shifted. I think sometimes the term 老外 gets misunderstood, but I'm very, very happy to be 老外. And I will always be 老外. Even I've now lived in China longer than I lived in the UK. So more of my life has been here than anywhere else. And, you know, my family's here, my son grew up here. And I always feel like the more you know about China and Chinese culture or Chinese language, the more you realize how much you don't know. So there's so much more to learn and understand. So I always feel like catching up a bit. Chinese people are so welcoming. You are, of course, you're an outsider. Of course, you're like Lao Wai. You're not Chinese, but that doesn't mean that you can't be part of the community. Of course, you're still part of the family, and you're just welcomed like, one of their own.